Hey, everybody. Welcome to the TEConnect podcast. I'm John Martin.
And I'm Dean Reverman.
I've talked about my past in retail before.
Yes.
The
storied past.
The horror stories.
Oh, the horror stories. Yes.
And yet the fun of it, too.
Yes.
It was some good times. But that's going on like over 20 years ago at this point.
Time flies, dude.
Which makes me realize just how old I'm actually getting. That was my early days.
Right.
But I can't imagine what retail's like now.
No. You mean working in?
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Working in it. Yeah, it's got to be a whole different world. There's competition from online shopping, other retailers as well. You're battling inflation right now.
Yeah.
There's the race to the bottom dollar between competitors or between some of those online dealers at this point.
People like Amazons of the world and stuff like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, that was becoming an issue when I was still in the biz at that time. And now there's this growing need to modernize and to embrace new technology. But that's kind of easier said than done. And modernization can come with some handoffs and some trade-offs, of what they can accomplish versus what they want to do and have the money and the budget to do. So that's a big part of what we're going to be talking about today.
Nice. Okay.
We have Intel's David Dobson joining us today.
Yes.
He's going to help us talk a little bit about, first of all, we're going to get into what are some of the outcomes that Intel is seeing in the retail space that supports, the kind of stuff in the technology, that maybe that we are hoping to drive.
Some of these advancements that are out there.
We're going to talk about AI, of course, because we got to talk about AI.
Of course. How can you not?
How's that impacting retail right now?
Right.
We're going to get into those trade-offs, and Dave's going to help us figure out, what's going on with these retailers that maybe want to do these things. They know that there's modernization needs, but again, are maybe potentially handicapped and looking for the best solutions right now.
Yeah, trying to weigh the decision, I guess, right? Yeah, some of that stuff. Okay,
exactly.
good.
And then we're going to talk about some of the concerns that retailers have about modernization and what may be keeping them from getting to where they need to go.
Okay, fair enough.
We
That's
got
a lot to talk
today.
about.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
All that plus our usual value to the VAR. What's TEConnecting with us? It's time to plug in and get connected.
Welcome to the TEConnect podcast. It's time to get connected.
As I mentioned, our guest today is David Dobson. He is the Global Industrial Director for Retail and Hospitality at Intel. David, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. We really appreciate having you. Tell us a little bit about your background. Where did you come out of? Usually when I talk to someone who's familiar with the retail industry, they probably had something to do with it at some point in their career. So tell us if that was the case for you and what's your day-to-day like at Intel now?
Right. Well, first of all, thanks, guys, for inviting me. It's great to be to join you today. So I am the exception that proves the rule. So I have never worked in retail, or as on the non-supplier side of retail, if I put it that way. So I have worked with retailers now, and I was doing the math the other day for about 35 years. My background, in the 1980s, I studied for a degree that everyone thought I was crazy to do, which was applied statistics and computing, which is basically AI today, right? So everyone thought, what the hell are you just studying a crazy topic like that for? So anyway, that was where I kind of started. I kind of fell into retail, working in software development, building point of sale systems back in the day, which was all about how do you get a traceability about what's happening in the retail store. And also, this might surprise you, but how do you minimize the amount of theft that's going on in those stores and have a traceable system that allows you to kind of track what's going on, etc. So all familiar topics for retailers today. Went from there through all sorts of different roles inside various ISVs. Joined Microsoft in 2003 to lead up first of all, the point of sale operation inside Microsoft, and then going into a retail industry job at Microsoft. Was promoted from a European role into a global role, and I've kind of been there ever since. The last 8 years at Intel, running the global industry team, focusing on how Intel can help those global retailers. I think you described it really well in your introduction, kind of understand what they can do with technology, how it can help them. And my view of retail is it's not one of these, there are some exceptions, but it's not one of these industries that just rips up everything and starts again. It's more about how they can use technology to advance a little bit and then a little bit more and then a little bit more. So it's that kind of incremental innovation journey that I've been on with retailers over the last 15 or 20 years. And it's a great position to be in. Intel is a great technology company. We've got some fantastic solutions and technologies that we offer, but also our partner ecosystem, and then having the opportunity to work on some digital innovation with end customers has been a great journey for me.
Yeah. Wow.
Nice.
There you go.
He's got the credentials.
See? There you go.
Maybe you didn't work in retail, but I think you've got the credentials for this particular
He certainly
topic.
understands it. Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
And I would say I have spent time in retail stores, because one of the things I learned is if you don't roll up your sleeves and go and do a job in a store, you really don't understand what retailers, or a warehouse, you really don't understand how difficult that job is. I think sometimes we have a view of from a shopper's perspective, but when you kind of flip to the other side and understand how difficult it is to run these environments and the type of jobs and things that people have to do, I think it gives you a different perspective of retail. So I have done that, but not be paid for it. I kind of volunteered to go and do that work experience. So yeah.
Well, good for you. And yes, to your point, there's a difference between being a customer and the actual worker. And
Yep.
you learn how to appreciate the workers that much more when you've been
sure.
on that side of the fence
Absolutely.
at some point.
Absolutely.
So.
Yeah.
Well, then let's start talking about this conversation about retail modernization and where we are right now, and let's start with the outcomes. So, you said yourself that you agreed that that retailers are trying to figure out like what's next, what am I going to do? So, what kind of outcomes are you and Intel seeing retailers start to pursue right now? And then talk to us a little bit about what kind of technology you think is going to start supporting those outcomes as well.
Okay, so great question. Very open-ended. So thank you for starting me with the softball. I would say, at the end of the day, we tend to think of two different types of things that retailers are trying to do. One is there a way you can improve my revenue, right? Can you help me create new lines of value that I can monetize with my customers? So that's kind of one perspective of how we can help retailers. And then the second perspective is, which is actually probably the easiest one, especially when you're talking with these the big retailers in the world, is how can you reduce the cost of my operations? So how can we make it cheaper for me to do what I do today, tomorrow? Or how can you improve the environment? We talked about the employees. So how can you make it easier for my employees to do what they need to do? How can you take some what we would call friction out of the system? How can you take some of those things that I have to do and put me into a position where I can free my staff to spend more time with customers? Because the more time you spend with customers, the more those customers are likely to be spending money with you, want to come back to you, and create a better experience for my staff. So that's kind of the two lenses that we look in terms of outcomes. But I would also say, one of the big problems that retailers face in a lot of these edge locations is just they don't have the data to really understand what's going on. So I compare and contrast the online world with the physical world in a retail environment. And if you think about what retailers understand about you as a shopper when you visit their website, it's kind of everything. They know every page you've clicked on. They know some of them are tracking what you're looking at, even on the page, so they know where you've looked at rather than what you've looked at. So, the great example is I kind of go in there, I might look at a shirt, I might think the green one is really nice, and then I switch and I pick the red one. And then if you do your analytics in the back end, you can figure out, well, actually, they probably wanted the green one, but they didn't have the right size. So that's why they bought the red one. So actually, is the demand signal the green shirt versus the red shirt? They can do all those kind of analytics, right? Know everything about you. And then you flip that to the store and you say, well, what do they know about what's happening with those shoppers in the store? And actually, they don't really know very much. They know how many people walked into my store. They know what people bought in the store, but that shopping, browse experience, they really don't know. So the big challenge for retailers is how do they start to unpick that, start to understand more about what's happening in their store environments? And instead of listening to anecdotes from a staff member about, oh yes, I saw this happen in my store, and then they respond to that. They really need to be data driven. And so how do they build those data trails to provide the information that they need to truly move forward in a predicted manner? And then, as I said before about the incremental innovation, I'm not going to rip up my entire store and digitize my entire store and then open it again to the public. How do I get there from where I am now without breaking the bank because I'm cash constrained? And if I've got 1,000 stores, how do I do it at scale from where I am today? So that big problem is they don't have that digital insight into their operational systems or their customers' activity. And so how do they get that? And how do they get there from where they are today? That would be kind of a lot of the conversations we have with retailers cover those areas.
That's good stuff right there. And when you think about it, I'm reminded of the word phygital, like, right. With that. I think with
the PHY,
yes,
yeah.
Because to David's point, it's all about, okay, the online world is relatively mature, right? I mean, you can heat map, a lot of the statistics, a lot of the data around the e-commerce. That's all fairly well mature. But in the retail physical space, to David's point, there is a lot of evolution happening there on the technology side. A lot of it's machine vision and being able to see what is happening and heat mapping stores. It's in the analytics behind the scenes that's going into, analyzing inventories and things of that nature. But we're really getting a much sharper picture of what's happening in the space. And it's interesting, David, it always comes down to the drivers of incentives and dollars, right? Like what am I going to invest in today that's going to start moving the needle in some of these areas, rather than just these science fair projects. We need to show business outcomes that have true meaning, and that's part of, I think, of what's happening out there. And then also I'll throw on the table, because I think we'll get into this. Again, when you think about the phygital space and just getting a better understanding of what's happening, also the theft and the shrinkage that is out there. I mean, we've talked about that a couple times on this podcast. It's just like, it's crazy what's going on in the marketplace. When you see I got a statistic here, shoplifting grew 19.4% in the U.S. In just 1 year. Wow. It's just, there's a lot of that. So retail spaces are very, very interested in knowing what is going on in their space and things of that nature. So it's really kind of creating this evolution, right? And the use of tech to address that.
Very much so. I found the idea that you mentioned, David, about the in-store data versus the online data. Mm-hmm. And I think what's funny about this is that there was a point where as digital retail was growing and as the Amazons of the world were taking off and some retailers were moving into the online space and others weren't, there was all this like, oh, do we really want this? And it's taken away from what we can do in store, and we can't grow grow someone's shopping cart the same way when we can't add on, in the digital space, whatever. And yet the other side of that, though, is, but you get so much more data out of the digital side right now. You do understand what people have been doing. I mean, you can't do that in the store. You can't have an associate there kind of peeking around the corner and watching what people are picking up and putting down. I mean, you could, but you'd probably scare some people off.
Get a little awkward.
You get a little bad reputation for that. So, I think that is an important transition point of figuring out, like, how can we get all the same kind of data? And we're always talking about data. I know that's a big part of what Intel does too, is how to collect and make meaningful, useful information out of this data. So to your point, when you mentioned the machine vision, I think that kind of leads us into our next topic here, which is the AI of it all.
Right. Yeah.
Because obviously we've now reached this hurdle or crossed this threshold with AI. And as David mentioned, he was playing with this a long time ago, and now gets to point at it and say, "See, I told you guys. Y'all thought I was an idiot for doing this years ago, but now I'm the smart one now." So, so obviously AI has become the big talking point, and we know that a lot of that Intel's working with a lot of amazing partners that really are embracing the power of AI, the power of machine vision, machine learning, and the ways that we can collect that data potentially in store or take what we learn online and apply that in store as well. So talk to us a little about that. How is AI affecting this modernization, in retail? How are you going forward in approaching retailers now that we know that AI is part of the game and that everyone's talking about it and maybe has a better understanding of it than they did before?
Yeah, so I think there's an AI is, maybe I'll say this because this is my home domain. It's a complicated world, right? And what do you mean by AI? Which bit of AI? So we tend to think of like three different types of AI solution that retailers are interested in. The first one is like the new solutions that are coming in from AI, something that wasn't possible before. And computer vision is a great example of that, right? Some of the things that you can do with computer vision, it opens up new opportunities that you just couldn't do. And you mentioned loss prevention a little bit earlier. Is this a technology that can help with that? I say help with it. It's not going to solve the problem, but how can we again get insights into what's really happening at a self-checkout? Is it really that people are hiding an item under an item? Is it they're getting frustrated with the device? Is it a different thing, right? So what is really happening at that checkout? How can we do that again at scale, not in the one or two pilot stores that we've got kind of people, as you said, sitting around the corner watching what's going on, or with a video camera somewhere? How can I figure that out across my 20,000 self-checkout lanes to really understand the patterns? And maybe in this part of the country, there's one thing going on, and another part, there's something else going on. So how do I get that real data that enables me to? So that's the AI new innovation space, and I think that's a really interesting area, and a lot of people are super interested in the opportunity there. But then there's a second piece, which is how are we going to start to see AI materialize in the solutions that we've got today, right? How where I've got, I don't know, my merchandise planning solution, how can AI help me get better merchandise plans, get better forecasting, improve what I'm doing, maybe not completely revolutionize it, but get an extra couple of percent of value in some of those systems. So it's kind of built in and embedded into those systems. And then the third piece is where retailers are taking hold of this technology themselves, as opposed to purchasing a great new solution or looking at incremental value in their existing solution set. They're starting to say, well, we need to understand this. We need to understand our data. We're going to take this. We're going to create some differentiated value between us and our competitors by truly investing in this technology and starting to take it into completely different places. So we kind of think of those three buckets as the way in which retailers are starting to explore AI. And then obviously there's lots of different ways in which you can start to see, we mentioned computer vision before, ChatGPT, can't mention AI without talking about some of those new ways of interfacing and understanding data. And there's lots of exploration, working with some really interesting both partners and some of the projects that we're working on with retailers to really start to unlock the value of some of this technology. I think the final piece I would say is, and you mentioned data, we've mentioned data an awful lot here. One of the things that people are starting to realize is if you really want to get value out of AI, you've got to have really good data, and you've got to have really well-structured data. And I think the final piece on that data is there's some nervousness I'm seeing from retailers about how much that data can be manipulated by external sources. So if you think about a safe space for AI, kind of exposing your training data to AI to maybe have nice new interfaces, and retailers have a huge turnover of staff. So if I'm going to bring somebody new into it, I go through a video, I do my training, then you let them out in the store, and there's no difference between once they're in the store, an experienced person who's been working there for the last 5 years and someone who's just walked through the door that day, and they're expected, finish my training, I'm going to be fully productive. Well, is there a way you can use AI to help them through those early days when they're not quite sure of the systems, and there's the tools that you can use with your training data to expose it in new ways? Can't quite remember how to do that refund. Okay, let's just call it up and we'll walk through the process as I'm doing it in front of the customer. So that's kind of the safe space. But if it's kind of AI applied to things like, I don't know, customer reviews, well, how easy is it for people who have maybe not the best interests of my retail or brand to manipulate that data to get AI to do strange stuff. And we've seen lots of examples. So that would be where I would say that retailers were a little bit more nervous about using some of this technology. And so a lot of what I've seen is the kind of focus on that good, clean, controllable data sets that they have, that they can manage themselves, and then starting to look at the technology and how it can help me from my perspective. So.
It really is a fascinating time to be in the retail space. I mean, when you think about the amount of technology now being deployed and the ability for it to be deployed there, I think David just did a very good job of giving you kind of that wide spectrum of all the areas, new solutions, how is it materializing itself today, and then the importance of the data analytics behind the scenes. I mean, we've talked about, remember we had Hanif Brown from FitMatch on. I mean, so here, an Intel partner, here you're using machine vision technology to improve the overall experience, right? The retail experience, which if people are going to go into the store, let's try to make that the best experience as possible, or enabling the associates there. So you have a lot that's kind of happening around there. I'll bring back out loss prevention. You've got great partners like Radius AI that Intel's bringing to the table that has this machine vision checkout system that uses machine vision to do object recognition. I don't know if they use Getty in their programming, but which is awesome by itself. But these are the types of things that are transforming the frictionless kind of quick checkout. I mean, all these things, and it's just fascinating. Yeah. But leveraging the data analytics on the back end, David. Maybe let's go in there a little bit more. There's such folks as like Pather AI and a couple of other companies that you guys are working with, but that really is kind of key, right? Because the data drives the online environment. But now if we can get a better understanding of the data that's coming out of our physical retail establishments, that's going to give these places the leg up. To your point, it sounds like you're seeing in the marketplace that they're leveraging their data so that their brands that they offer can better understand what's happening in the retail place. And so that's going to be key moving forward, is being able to leverage that data, right?
Yeah, 100%. I think, and you mentioned some great partners there, and thank you so much for doing that. And I think those two areas fold into those kind of spaces that I described right at the very beginning, right? Is it helping you take cost out of your business, improve your operational efficiency, and loss prevention in our world kind of falls into that space, because that's just leakage of money going out through the front door, right? How can you start to attack that? Well, how can you start to address that? And obviously, there's lots of other things. It's not just about putting a camera on a checkout and suddenly the world gets better. There's lots of other things you have to do, integrating it with what you are comfortable doing in terms of how you respond. But it all starts from that data, from that analytics, from the AI being able to identify patterns of behavior, patterns that you can then, as a retailer, leverage. And that could be identifying new opportunities, creating a promotion based upon knowing who's in your store at the moment. That thing we call personalization. How far down the line can you go towards that personalized interaction with the shopper? In Europe, people are a little bit more nervous about that than they are in the UK and in the US. If someone's going to offer me a discount, I don't care whether they call me David or call me whatever. I don't mind if I'm going to get the discount. I'm really comfortable with that. In some other areas, you address people by the name and they haven't formally introduced you. That really doesn't work. So the AI providing the prompt, providing the data, providing the signals that are happening, and then how you respond to them is really up to you as a retailer, how you want to interpret that data aligned with your brand values, aligned with the offering you're trying to provide to your customer. Are you a discount retailer, in which case you're just trying to make it easy for my shopper to find what they want and get out? Or are you a brand retailer where you really want to get the person to spend more time with you and the brand, and you want to interact with them and you want to know them personally? But the AI can work in either mode, right? It's really about how to provide that information. And then connecting all these sources as well. At the point at which you've got the person in front of you that wants to shop with you, can you leverage all of that information to really make that engagement and that interaction that you're having with them compelling for that shopper? And that's a very personalized view. You know, we kind of joke. I was talking to my manager, and he was saying, you know, David, if I never needed to go to a shop ever again in my life, I would be happy. Well, that's definitely that type of shopper. And then there's other one, my daughter, who's in her mid-20s, on the other hand, seems to live her life in shops, and that's all she wants to do. So how do you deal with these different types of shoppers, different demographics, different interests? How do you appeal to all of them, which is what you have to do as a mass market retailer? Well, the only way you can do that is to get as much data as you can about the people and provide your staff with the right tools and systems to allow them to have the correct interaction with those shoppers.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But what's I think is going to be fascinating to see is how a lot of the technology adoption that happens at what we'll call those tier one mass retailers is going to trickle down into the SMB, I think, relatively quickly, because there's a lot of stuff that can enable this with edge compute and things of that nature that really a lot of these ecosystems are evolving so very, very quickly. And these applications are already, scalable by design. Right. It's just a matter of kind of getting the word out and then figuring out, which is the best to use or not, which is kind of, I guess, a lead into your next question. Right?
I was just gonna say you keep building out the segues for me here. I appreciate that, because I think that is where we got to get into now and talk about the trade-offs here. Yeah. Because again, to your point, a lot of our VARs work more on the SMB side. They're sure the Walmarts of the world and the Targets of the world, they understand, they know what they're trying to do. They're ready to go out there and roll out this amazing technology and drive as much innovation and get as much data as they possibly can and appeal to all that broad spectrum of customers. But how do we get that moved down a little bit? How do we get down to that next level? And obviously a lot of retailers, especially as you go down from those tier one stores, they're going to be interested in this technology. They're going to see it out there. They're going to see what the big dogs are doing and be like, man, I'd love to do that too. But I'm facing price pressures. I'm dealing with inflation. I'm dealing with economic concerns. And granted, that stuff kind of has ebbs and flows and won't necessarily last forever, but there's always something going on in the world of retail, and the competition is not going away anytime soon. So when they're looking at must-haves versus nice-to-haves, like, I like this, but do I actually need it? I like that, and I think I do need it. How do we get into that conversation of weighing the difference between the two? And from that VAR perspective, going out there and working with those SMB retailers, how do they have that conversation about, hey, I know what you've seen up here and what you'd like to do. Here's where we are with you right now, what we can do right now, and what really matters for your business.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I do agree that for the majority of retailers, they're not Walmart, they're not Target. They don't have thousands of people and hundreds of data scientists, etc. But sometimes my reflection is, when you have a lot of those resources, you also have a highly complex system that you're managing, which in the SMB space, often they don't, right? A lot of the systems and tools, it's a simpler infrastructure, not by design, by necessity, because they haven't been able to go and do some of the stuff that these high-end retailers have been able to do. And I think of it a little bit like sometimes, I remember the mobile networks. I remember, I'm over here in Europe, we kind of got to 3G early, which meant the move to 4G got really difficult for European mobile networks. Whereas in other parts of the world, they just started with 4G and it was really easy. And I think there may be the good news story for some SMB retailers, actually, there's some things that they can do quite easily, probably easier than the big guys, to move forward. And I think, there's two things we always start the conversation with. One is the data, which we've already talked about. Make sure your data is in, especially for the high priority areas that you want to get some AI value from. And maybe it's a little bit of a kind of, where are the high value areas? Where have I got good data? And it's kind of a trade-off between the two. So one absolutely is that data infrastructure needs to be good and clean and strong and consistent, and over time, right? Not just today. I haven't just cleaned it up and now I can put my AI. Over the life cycle of these systems, my data has to stay clean and stay good for the AI to really provide the value. But then I think the second piece is an infrastructure piece. A lot of retailers that we've seen, especially in the SMB space, they've kind of deployed point solutions over the years. A solution from a point of sale, a solution for my digital signage, a solution for my HR systems. And that edge infrastructure is super complicated. And so one of the things that we started to talk about, especially with COVID drove a behavioral change because of necessity. People had to invest much quicker than they did before. They had to go do things at a pace they'd never done before in retail. And the business got a positive sense from that, saying, well, actually, we can do stuff a bit faster than we thought we can do without actually crashing our business. And so a lot of people started to say, well, actually, we need to standardize our edge infrastructure. We need to start to think about a platform at the edge to create that space to do this innovation. Because if I'm just going to put another infrastructure in for my computer vision system, another infrastructure in for my other AI solution, whatever that is, I'm just going to make my world even more complex than it is today. And that's a path to pain, as opposed to I need to get my data layers sorted. I need to get my edge infrastructure into a consistent view so that I can put all of my solutions into that consistent infrastructure. I can reduce my management costs. I can make my systems simpler. I can create those connection points across those solutions to create the value that we're talking about here. I think that's one of the other starting points that a lot of retailers need to think about. I think you mentioned cloud earlier, right? So they've got used to having a consistent infrastructure in their cloud solutions. I just deploy another solution in that cloud infrastructure. And retailers are starting to say, can I do that at the edge? Can I bring some of that thinking, some of that approach to the edge solutions to really simplify the way in which they're deployed and managed and secured over a life cycle? And so that's another one of the starting points that we have when we talk to retailers about this problem.
Well, when I think about the must-haves and the nice-to-haves, I'll just go back to what David said early on in the conversation. Of course, the economics are going to drive it, right? What are some of the things that are going to move either top line or bottom line results? And when you think about it, I can just imagine a retail establishment having so many voices, as any company does. You got the front of the house people that want better experience. Let's invest in, the types of technologies that are going to make the customer experience that much better. Mm-hmm. You got the back of the house folks that are saying, well, we need a better, analytics going on here. And by the way, we can use machine vision for safety protocols and understanding, how are things moving about in our warehouse space and things of that nature. And then the whole back of house. So, what's interesting though is that the compute is no longer really kind of the constraint. I think David was kind of going there. Companies getting a better understanding of what their edge play is going to be. And I think there's some studies coming out of the ability to utilize some of the existing compute in ways that weren't even being thought of. For example, if you have a point of sale system, the amount of compute power on there is more than adequate to run the point of sale. And oh, by the way, you could probably run a machine vision type of application that is doing quality control for back of house, or is maybe running some digital signage for you, so that you can. So there's I think utilizing, and correct me if I'm wrong here, David, maybe I don't think I'm getting over my skis here, but kind of utilizing, well, how can we utilize this edge compute even more efficiently with some of these solutions and things of that nature, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. We just had an event here in Europe we call Intel Vision. We did one in Phoenix about a month ago in the US. And we had a partner that was showcasing exactly what you just described, right? Self-checkout unit. They had 2 cameras on this self-checkout unit, which was additional to what you would typically expect to get at there. One is doing age verification. Wouldn't it be nice, gentlemen of our age who want to buy a bottle of wine, why would we need to be ID'd? Well, I think you're clearly over 20.
Yes, no, you're good. You're good. Yes.
So it's probably safe for you to sell, right? So that was one example. Well, that's a camera that's running off the processor unit that's just the normal POS device. And then they had a second camera on there that was detecting produce, right? So instead of kind of going through that long menu that you have to do to find a particular piece of fruit that you want to buy or the particular vegetable that you've got loose. Well, it spots it and it says, oh, is that an apple? And is it this apple? And have you got 3 of them? And so now I'm getting a nice experience through the checkout. It's not surprising me, it's helping me. And like you say, that's 2 cameras running 2 different workloads, one doing product detection, one doing age verification, again, all on the same compute platform. Now, they had a third solution around loss prevention, and it's a little bit of a stretch to use that compute platform now. But actually, we've started to do some tests with our next generation, which will come out next year. And guess what? You'll probably be able to run that loss prevention workload as well on that edge device. So as you say, over time, as things are evolving and developing, especially as accelerators are being put onto that edge device as well, just built into the signal. You've probably heard of AI PCs. That's all around accelerators being put on the die with the CPU. And again, that gives you the compute power to start to extend those workloads. And another great example, as you gave, is digital signage integrated with the POS, especially in maybe a convenience store space where you've only got one checkout lane. And wouldn't it be great to have the digital signage working integrated on that platform? And maybe the weigh scale, then you can integrate that with product detection as well. So yeah, the compute platform is getting better and better and better, and there's a lot of different AI workloads you can run off that edge compute platform today.
Absolutely.
Nice.
Yep.
Well, so then it sounds like obviously, we're the computing part isn't necessarily the issue. It's not a matter of, cost is obviously going to be a thing, but kind of what you hinted at there earlier, David, is that even with cost concerns, even with where we already are with technology, that maybe on the SMB side is a great place to go ahead and still maybe play around a bit and try things out, because you don't run the risk that you do in a giant global retailer of affecting your brand or trying to figure out how to roll this out to a massive amount of stores, or even if you're just trialing it in one place, bad press can still come out of that if you mess up something.
Right.
If Joe's flower shop down the street tries something out and it doesn't work out, it's
not so much.
Most likely, no one's really going to hear much about it. Maybe a couple of his customers got a little disgruntled for a day or something, or him and his employees did. But most likely, it's a much smaller, problem that potentially occurred there. So then, if that's not necessarily the things that are keeping people from this modernization, what is? What other things are keeping the retailers from modernizing? What's causing them to hesitate? Is it the training aspect? You mentioned earlier, like maybe there's ways around that. Is it the implementation? Again, that idea of not wanting to try to rip and replace or not having the ability to shut down for, any time to do that. Is it concerns about, the government, intervening with tools like AI and self-checkout? We've heard some rumors about stuff like that. So what other stuff are you hearing that's keeping retailers from moving forward where they need to be in order to actually modernize?
Yeah, so this is the $1 million question, right? Why we all know, and in the tech world, we all know we've got some cool stuff here. So why are people not deploying that? And I think a lot of the reasons you kind of walk through there. I think the first one is, and I've just described to you what we can do with our technology. But the reality is not many people out in the market know you can do that with their technology. They think that it is high cost to do some of this stuff. So I think one of the messages we're trying to deliver is not necessarily, yes, it can be high cost, but there are actually some things you can do today. Going back to that, how do I get to my nirvana world from where I am now? Well, you do it step by step by step, right? So maybe there's some things that you can do today with what you have today that might surprise you, that actually is a big step forward for you as an individual. So I think there's cost concerns, and there's a message that says, actually, you don't have to go big bang. I remember when Amazon Go stores came out, whatever it was, 5 or 6 years ago, everyone thought, oh my goodness, we're going to have to throw everything away and do that. Well, actually, what retailers have realized that is there's maybe some things that they can use that technology for that just is a step forward from where they are. So that's one message. I think regulation is an important thing. People are definitely, or governments and regulatory bodies around the world are kind of cluing into this and starting to say, well, we need to have, and it's usually consumer protection. So it's usually how do we protect our consumers, or at least our voters, from this technology. And so, yeah, there's definitely some things that retailers need to think about from a regulation perspective. Actually, we've got some interesting partners that can help with that as well, in terms of auditing your solution to make sure it is compliant and it's provably compliant. So again, some great innovation in that area. So I think that's another factor. But I think also just nervousness and trust in the system. One of the things that we've talked with, and you mentioned a couple of our partners like FitMatch, Radius AI, I think a lot of retailers look at the solution and go, great, but I'm not sure they truly believe that solution really does what it does. There's a magical element at the moment to AI. When you see it working really well, you kind of go, is that really true? Does it really do that? And will it really do that at scale? So I think there's an element of trust into the technology that is also holding some people back, which is where, you mentioned loss prevention before a couple of times. I think that's where there's kind of been a sweet spot for this technology where people are saying, well, it's costing me so much. Maybe it's not such a cost issue. Maybe it's not such a trust issue. I don't have to solve 100% of this checkout lane problem. But if I can just get that 90% growth down to 10% growth, I can absolutely measure what impact that has on my bottom line. I can go figure this stuff out, and then I can iterate towards a better solution over time. So I think that's one of the breaking points over the last 18 months for this technology, where people are starting to say, okay, I've got such a big problem, I'm just going to have to use this technology to fix it. And that's developed some of this trust. And now people are now saying, oh, okay, what else can we use this technology for? How else can we leverage this in new ways? But I think those issues that you talked about, trusting the technology, the cost of the technology, and the belief in the marketplace that this is still expensive to do, as opposed to actually know you can do it at a lower cost. There's some of the issues that are really holding people back.
Hesitation comes from a lot of different places, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I think about training, and when I think about training, then I think about culture. Like, what is the culture of adopting new technologies? It's fascinating when you kind of take a step back and look at, technology companies are very used to running downhill. And, if there's an issue or an error, no problem, let's go back, let's do another sprint, let's figure it out, right. Especially on the software side, right? There's not a fear of like releasing stuff that, maybe not all the bugs are worked out, whatever. Right. Kind of a thing. Whereas, not so much the case in old retail, right? They're just not used to this, adapting this kind of change. Mm-hmm. And, but when you think about the younger generation coming in, and to me, it's a cultural thing, right? Just being able to adopt new tools, knowing that there might be some bumps along the way. I think the younger generation is acceptable to that, well, at least they're trying. I'd rather work for a cool company that's trying this innovative stuff than one that's not. It's like, right. So,
but those processes that you talked about there, I think that's really key. I mean, I worked on a project a number of years ago now around employees being able to provide feedback to the corporate. And it was key that they used their mobile phones to actually make that happen. Mm-hmm. Well, partway through the project, we realized there was actually this particular retailer we were talking to. They had a process that said, you will take your mobile phone and you will lock it in the employee locker, and you will not use that on the shop floor.
Right.
Well, fundamentals of this project was if they saw a problem, they would kind of tweet effectively to corporate. Well, How can they do that? Because they can't leave the shop floor. So as you rightly say, processes and the way in which you traditionally work, they have to all be updated. They have to be modernized. People have to start to think about what impact this is going to have for the employees, and that training of those employees in what to expect from the technology and how to use and leverage the technology. All of that needs updating as we start to deploy some of these new solutions and technologies. Yeah. So that's a super important thing to remember. And again, they don't have huge departments in the SMB space that the Walmarts of the world do. How do you do that at scale and not break the bank? And so that's not about technology being the cost. That's about change within my business being the cost. And how do I manage that change as this technology becomes available. I think that is a great point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And wouldn't it be nice if we were all Apple, or if any retailer is Apple? Because I think about the retail. Well, right. Well, the Apple retail experience is phenomenal. Like you walk in there, but then I think to myself, well, they only got like 10 products that they're selling. I mean, it's all hands on deck, and anything you need, at any time, and in the back, and they've got but I think about, then you think of extrapolating that to a larger one. Woof. But anyway, yeah.
But when that Apple Store first started and they had those handheld devices, I mean, you guys probably remember a lot of retailers did that. Said, "Oh, Apple's doing handhelds. We got to do handhelds. We got to give all our staff handhelds." And then figured out actually why and how does that help me? How does that improve the customer experience or simplify my employees? It was just another device that they kind of carried around with them. And as you say, and that does happen sometimes in retail, but it's the why question, I think, is the other question that a lot of retailers are asking themselves with AI. Yeah, it's cool, it's exciting, but why? How is that going to help me? How is that going to improve either me be more efficient and better serve my customers, or make it better for the customer who's shopping with me? And I think that's a great example where a technology worked for one retailer, but it doesn't necessarily work for others.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Great point.
Definitely. All right. Well, we're going to wrap up in a moment by having David tell us a little bit more about how you can become a good modernization partner for your retail customers. Mm-hmm. But first, as always, we want to thank our sponsors here on the TEConnect podcast. Of course, a big thank you to Intel.
Yes, thank you, Intel.
Supporting the show for some time now and lent us amazing guests so that we can talk to you like David. Hey, if you like the show, make sure that you're liking it, that you're subscribing, you're recommending it to a friend.
Yep.
Just
pass the word
if
around.
You have the chance, to sneak onto a friend's phone and open up their podcast app and subscribe to the podcast forum.
Give it a 5-star rating.
I'm not saying that's a great thing to do. It might ruin your friendship. I don't know.
But we're okay with it.
But we're okay with it. Yeah, exactly. I'm endorsing it. But if there's fallout from it, I apologize. Of course, as always, reach out to us too. Let us know what you want to hear about on the show. Let us know what you like and don't like about the show. You can always leave reviews for us anywhere that you're able to on a podcast feed. Mm-hmm. Leave us comments on our YouTube channel, and don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can always find us on the BlueStar LinkedIn page or email us directly, TEConnect@BlueStarInc.com. All right, let's wrap things up, first of all, with our value to the VAR. I feel like we've been hinting around a lot of this stuff of how our channel partners and VARs and ISVs can get out there. And again, a lot of the folks that we work with here at BlueStar, they specialize in that edge deployments and those edge devices that are working out there. And Intel, you guys talk a lot about the whole idea of edge to cloud. And you mentioned that a little bit earlier, David, the idea of the cloud services and the idea of attaching devices to what's already existing out there. So let's kind of, future cast here a little bit. What do you, when you look to the future of modernization that's happening out there on the edge, how do you think VARs and ISVs can better position themselves and partner up to become the modern solution architect that can take these retailers beyond the tier one stuff, to the next level where we think they are going and need to get to?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I think it comes back to something that we said earlier. You got to simplify things. And when you simplify things, you play to all of those strengths that we talked about before. It makes it easier for your employees to consume this technology. It makes it lower cost for you as a retailer. And the reason we talk about edge to cloud at Intel is people have kind of understood what the cloud does is offer you flexibility. It allows you to manage and secure your systems in a way that you've not been able to do before. It allows you to innovate at a speed that you've never been able to do before. And I think bringing those approaches to deploying and managing technology to the edge is the single biggest, I think, opportunity in our space. So if you had that flexible compute platform that we talked about before that allows you to add workloads without always adding compute, or modify your compute platform without impacting your solutions and the services you're providing to your staff and also to the customers, I think that's a huge boon. And then simplify the way in which you manage that. We haven't talked about the life cycle of these systems. Often these systems are deployed and then left out in these retail or environment stores or warehouses or whatever for long periods of time. So how do you manage them over that life cycle? And by the way, that's a new thing for AI solutions. How do you manage an AI solution over a lifetime? We talked about loss prevention. People are really cool at figuring out how systems stop, where they can detect what I'm doing and where they can't. And if you just put something out there and expect it to be as good in 5 years' time as it is today, well, as good in 5 months' time than 5 years' time as it is today, well, it's got to be continuous iteration, and you've got to manage those over the life cycle of those solutions. And as we mentioned earlier, COVID, right? Such a disruptive activity. How can you insulate your business from those types of impacts and make sure you have the flexibility to provide the right services to your business that your business needs, right? I think we've always talked about at Intel is IT should become like a utility, right? Like you don't plug in something into the wall and say, do I have enough energy costs for that? I know I'm going to pay a bit more for it, but it's just a utility. It's just there. And the IT needs to start to be like that. And the cloud was a move towards there. And I think that edge moving to that single flexible platform is going to be super important. And our VARs play a really important position in doing that, because they're going to be the front face of deploying all of that technology to these SMB retailers. It's not going to be Intel, it's not going to be BlueStar that's going to be picking up the phone when people still phone.
Yeah.
Picking up the phone when they have a problem. It's going to be our VARs, and they're going to be frontline in terms of deployment and management of this solution over time. So it's a really important channel for us at Intel as well.
That's
IT
good
is
stuff.
utility. I like that.
Yeah. I mean, solution architects, modern solution, it's in your question, right?
Yeah.
They need to be partners. And that's part of the growth strategy. If you're not partnering and getting into the ecosystem, look, all this modernization happens at lightning speed. So you can't keep up with it unless you have the right partners to do that and the right platforms to be on and things of that nature. And so that's critical moving forward. Everybody's leaning in, especially Intel.
Agree. And David, I like what you said a while back about a lot of these retailers just don't even know what's available to them, what's out there. So I think if you're just spending some time just telling them what can be done, showing them what can be done, start small. Go out and solve a problem, not the problems or all the problems. Just solve a problem. Maybe you can solve all the problems eventually. That's fine. If you can, great. But you got to start somewhere. And I think when you start somewhere is when you start building up that trust.
Yep.
And again, we know that all these retailers are going to have to get to this point someday. These giant solutions that are playing in the tier one space, as you mentioned earlier, they're going to start trickling down over time, and eventually the smaller ones will get these kind of solutions as well. But if you're the one who's out front, if you're the one who's having the conversations, you're starting small, you're helping them build a little bit into their business to make things a little bit better, then you're also going to be the one that when they do pick up that phone,
that's right,
tweet or text or send an email, whatever it is they do, or who knows what it'll be in 20 years.
It'll be to you.
Yeah, however they reach out, they're going to be reaching
Neuralink,
out to you.
Yes, they'll just think it, right? Yeah,
they're going to send a brainwave your way or something. Yeah. All right, let's wrap up as always with our favorite segment, What's Tech Connecting with You? This is where we get to talk about anything in the business, in the world of innovation, science, discoveries, technology, business, just something that's caught our eye that we feel like chatting about today. David, I'll let you kick off here. What's Tech Connecting with you right now?
I'm going to do something that's a little bit historical rather than looking future forward, right? So I'm a kind of history geek, so I love history. And I was listening to this, it was a TED talk, and somebody was talking about how do we put a man on the moon, right? On the same year that they started the project for how do we put a man on the moon, they started a separate project, which was around something called DARPA, which was the precursor to the internet. So both projects in the US started at the same time, right? 1968, fast forward, like 5 or 6 years later, they'd actually put a man on the moon. Meanwhile, the internet project sitting in the background had advanced to actually the first message being sent across the network. And interestingly, it was H and then E and then L, and then the system crashed. They didn't get to the second L and the O before the system crashed, right? And I think back, and I think if you were sitting there in the funding body that was funding those two projects, and one had put a man on the moon and the other had sent 3 letters across a network after the same period of time, which one would you continue to invest in? And then you look forward to today and you think, I'm really glad they carried on investing in that HELL project, because it's changed our life so much more than the other project over that time period.
I feel
that's
like
a good one. That's a really good one.
That's also one of those things that makes you realize how amazing it is that we actually did pull off the moon landing.
Oh, yeah.
Given that we were struggling to do something that sounds so simple now, and yet we managed to get some people up on the moon, and with the technology that we had, a half century ago and plus, and we still did it. So that's pretty cool.
There's a whole YouTube subculture about how we didn't get to the moon.
Well, that's true. Yeah. Stanley Kubrick on a soundstage, according to some folks. So. All right, Dean, what's TEConnecting with you?
Well, just when you thought LLMs were cool, right? I mean, they're cool.
Yeah.
Well, Google reveals Project Astra. Have you heard of this?
I have heard of this.
So this is an AI-powered app that can answer queries based on objects in front of the camera's field of vision. Mm-hmm. And so they rolled this out, and they showed a little example of it. It's pretty cool. Look, Google Glass. Remember Google Glass? It was like whatever.
That we all laughed
almost
about.
a decade ago at this point, which is sad. That was supposed to be the next, revelation, I guess.
Right.
Going back to your point, David, maybe, I don't know, do you invest in a company like a Google Glass after it kind of flopped and didn't do it? But now you have this, Project Astra, which is really kind of fascinating. So they showed the use case of a person just holding up a phone and asking the AI agent, what do you see in the field of vision? Or
where am I right now?
Exactly.
What's around me? Yeah.
Or do you see anything that makes noise? And it says, yes, I see a speaker. And then you can draw, like, what is this component of the speaker? Oh, that's the tweeter. And it's just very engaging. I'm like, ooh, that's kind of cool. That's taking LLM to like a whole different level, right? Where you're just able to use. Now I can see that having manifesting itself in glasses and being meaningful. Like, you just point to something and say, well, what is that? Or give me a little bit more information on that. So they're not there on rolling it out just yet. They wanted to kind of tease, I guess, the marketplace with this. And there's a lot of, I guess, stuff that needs to go into commercializing it before we get there. But it's visualizing data in real time and using that. It's, frame by frame. It's analyzing it. And I can just imagine some of the compute power that's going on behind the scenes to make that happen. But I don't know. I'm looking forward to maybe to Project Astra coming down the line. Where I just point my camera at stuff and start asking. Yeah,
there's been a plethora of new AI stuff that was announced in the last couple weeks or so. Like you've got now the ones that are the more robust voice interactive systems. One of them apparently sounds very much like Scarlett Johansson in the movie Her. Did you ever see that movie?
No, I didn't.
It's a movie with her. Well, she was the voice of like the AI in the movie. It was Joaquin Phoenix was the main character in it, and. Which I'm like, hey, I can't be too upset about that. I mean, it's just a very pleasant voice, I wouldn't mind my AI talking to me like that. But just stuff like that, like all of a sudden we're just talking about these giant leaps of like, better video and better vision and pulling what we can out of that, better assistants, AI voice assistants that are more conversational and more pleasant to interact with.
Yeah.
So
the voice on this one was very pleasant.
Yeah.
I don't know that it was Scarlett Johansson, but it was very pleasant. Yes. Yeah.
So it's just interesting stuff there. I'm looking forward to see where that goes too.
What's
all right, so I'll get into this is an interesting story that is both not surprising and also a little bit sad at the same time, which is a portal that was set up in New York City to connect the world to Dublin.
Oh,
so there was portals there was one in Dublin and one in New York City.
Okay,
where basically it was a live video feed essentially.
All right,
where on either side they had this like big round portal and people could walk in front of it and you could see the folks in Dublin in front of theirs.
Yeah, I got
folks in New York in front of theirs. They could wave to each other. They'd hold up signs and kind of communicate and just just an interesting way to connect the world in real time, across the pond,
Fair enough.
And, and different places in the world at different times of day. And, a great idea about bringing people together. But as humanity is wont to do, we started, figuring out ways to make it problematic and difficult.
Okay.
So this thing went live, I think, just early May, here in early May.
Oh, geez, that was just,
And only about maybe a week or two later, they had to shut it down. They've since reopened it, I think, just a couple days ago.
Okay.
But they had to shut it down for a while because apparently people were starting to expose themselves on it.
Of course.
There were people like walking up to with a video camera, putting video up on it or whatever, and displaying that on the camera where people could see on the other side some disturbing imagery and
good Lord,
weird signs and stuff or whatever. Of course, people were finding all the wrong ways to
Yes.
actually use this. And it's one of those, I'm like, well, of course, you stick a camera out there and people are going to
get humans involved and it just goes off the rails quickly.
Exactly.
Yes.
So they've since tried a few innovations to maybe prevent that. They set up I think they put some barriers now where you can't get as close anymore. And they also set up something where if you do get up close and if someone gets in a certain proximity, there's like a proximity sensor where if you get too close to the camera, it blurs the image out for the other side entirely.
See?
So
that's probably using some AI.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
So they're making some efforts there, but it's just one of those things. I'm like, come on, like, can't we just have something? And granted, they said the majority of folks that were on either side were pleasant and sweet,
of course,
and waving and kind gestures and holding up signs like, "Hey, we love you, Dublin. We love you, New York."
Right.
What I also found funny about this too is when I heard about this and I heard about people doing bad stuff and like the town being like, "Oh, this is a stain on us." I thought for sure this would all be about the New Yorkers causing the problem. But no, I hear the Dubliners were like, no, this was badly representing our town. We got drunks coming out there holding up their Guinness and goofing off or whatever. All right. I guess it's a universal. Doesn't matter where you're from.
It's universal. That's
universal that people will do bad things.
I think it also depends where you put it. And they put it right in amongst all the nightclubs in Dublin.
No.
Not a good move.
Oh, no. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that. I'm like,
the other story I heard was they'd switched it off for 12 hours before the people in Dublin realized it had been switched off. So they were still doing all their cool stuff.
Oh, that's awesome.
There was no response. So.
Nice.
That's awesome.
That's good stuff.
I'll be following this. I'll be interested to see if this actually manages to work or if it just gets shut down permanently at some point. But I guess it was a neat idea, and humanity just isn't ready to behave when a camera gets switched on at this point. So,
it was a great one.
All right, that's what's Tech Connecting with us today. David Dobson with Intel. Thank you so much for joining us today. Appreciate having you on the show. It is time for us.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Yeah. Definitely. It's time for us to unplug. Until next time, go out, roll up your sleeves, walk a mile in a retailer's shoes.
There you go.
Help them find some modernization solutions.
I love it.
And if you see a portal to another country, just behave.
Yeah, be nice.
Just for a moment. Just wave and move on and behave. And as always, folks, please stay connected. TEConnect Podcast is brought to you by Intel. Hey, if you enjoy this episode, there's more where that came from. Intel has graciously been sponsoring the TEConnect podcast for almost 3 years, providing a steady stream of excellent guests, thoughtful ideas on next-gen technology, and potential new partnerships to explore. So you can find all of the episodes featuring Intel SMEs and their recommended partners in one YouTube playlist. Topics include selling market-ready solutions, spatial intelligence, crowd management technology, AI, and machine learning use cases, removing the risk of emerging tech, and so much more. Check out the link in the show notes for the full playlist or go to BlueStar Inc. on YouTube and find it under the Playlists tab. TEConnect Podcast is also brought to you by Elo and their new Quick Ship program, expediting deliveries of select Intel-based, all-in-one touchscreen computers. I mean, we all like quick shipping, right?
We do, absolutely. It's got to get here.
Yeah, it's like, no one wants to wait for stuff anymore.
No.
I love how waiting is a perk now. Like, if you're like buying something on Amazon, if you say, I'll wait, they like give you like 50 cents in like credit or something,
I see. Yes.
Just for like waiting like 3 extra days or something. Like, fine, I can do that.
Yeah.
But you may not be able to, and your customers may not either. So the Quick Ship initiative promises readily available inventory of Elo POS and iSeries 2 models with various processors, memory, and storage options. Additionally, they include Celeron models in the program at reduced prices. Elo will ship applicable SKUs to BlueStar within 10 business days. Check out the link in the show notes for a list of eligible products. Quick Ship program is limited to North America and Latin American quantities of 20 units or less. Contact the BlueStar Elo team with any questions.